Hi everyone, welcome to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagle.
And I'm Josh Fenton, CEO of GoLocal. We are in part two of breaking down John Della Volpe's poll conducted for GoLocal, finished up about a week, beginning of the week. And John was here yesterday in studio overviewing the governor's race.
Yes, we talked about part one, all of the attributes that folks are looking at for a potential new governor, to the horse race itself, having Governor Gina Raimondo at about 40, Alan Fung at 32, and Joe Trillo coming in at 17. Talk to me with your reaction to those numbers.
Well, I think the reaction is what you saw, and John talked about it, was that the governors had the greatest movement. Her $5 million in media spend had some positive impact. I mean, it's not a tremendous move, but it's given her some distance. It's also, Alan Fung lost a little. Joe Trillo didn't actually move from June. He was at 17% in our poll then, but it's Governor Raimondo who's picked up a little bit of momentum. I do think people should caution. John really laid out what the pathway is for Alan Fung to be competitive in this race, to go to some core Republican values, talking about controlling taxes, being fiscally responsible, and juxtaposing himself from Governor Raimondo, who has talked about some big budget expenses like free college, and we'll talk about free college in this. So let's get started on the big issues, and we're also going to talk about the United States Senate race.
Hey, let's get started on the big issues. Partners in Care New England. So the question was, it was announced that state officials approved the fast-track regulatory review of Massachusetts-based Partners-based healthcare, their takeover of Care New England, Rhode Island's second largest hospital system and operator of Women and Infants, Butler, and Kent hospitals. So the randomized questions were, do you believe the quality of care for Rhode Islanders will improve, worsen, stay about the same, or don't know? Improve was 21%, worsen 19%. Stay about the same, 44, and don't know, 16.
Yeah, I think what you see is a fair amount of people, the majority of people either think it's going to stay the same or just don't have any opinion. Slight advantage to that it might improve, bringing down a healthcare giant out of Boston. Partners is a mammoth organization, $13 billion annual budget. It's a third larger than the state of Rhode Island's budget. They employ 77,000 people. They're a megalopolis. So that split 21% to improve, 19% said it would get better.
Let's talk about the jobs number. Do you believe the number of jobs available to Rhode Islanders will increase 22%, decrease 27%, stay about the same 38%, and don't know 13%? So a little pessimism perhaps about the potential as folks have talked about.
Yeah, I mean, usually when you see an outside interest come in by one of the major state institutions, corporations, whether it was Bank of America purchasing Fleet Bank, massive job losses in Rhode Island, we can go through, episode after episode like that, that you're going to see a lot of job loss. In preparation for this sale, Care New England, as they were in negotiations with Partners, closed Memorial Hospital. That was 800 jobs right there. And so you've already seen, between the cuts at Memorial, the closure of Memorial, and other cuts within the Care New England system, more than 1,000 jobs cut in just the past year or so. That hospital group has lost in the last 2 years about 120 or 130 million dollars. So it's got some significant financial problems. The question is, does Partners come down and take the jobs out and move them to Boston and have a further adverse impact on healthcare jobs?
I think that was $1 million question. Of course, you can't ask them all. And one of the ones that the potential of the impact is having to then go up to Boston for care, which is something that Rhode Islanders have talked about as well.
Yep.
Let's talk about a local issue right behind us here, the proposal for the Thane Tower 46-story luxury residence in Providence next to the public riverfront park. The developer will invest $250 to $300 million of his own funds. Project's called Hope Point Tower. It would be 170 feet taller than the Superman building and would require waiving height restrictions and the use of tax credits. Net favor, 39%. Net opposed, 52%.
Yeah, almost no movement from when we asked this question in June. I think the opponents, people like Providence Preservation Society, have been very active on this issue. The developer less so. The developer's not run any public education campaigns or any advertising campaigns, and so hasn't really moved the needle at all. It's a huge issue for the construction industry and the unions, who have been very adamant about this, moving this project forward. Senate President Dominic Ruggiero has been all about this project. Sabatoni over at the trades have been very, very active on this issue, and I think you're going to see a lot of pressure from those two groups, especially because the Pawsox Stadium is not going to happen. The other thing that GoLocal had unveiled was a trip up to Toronto and seeing what the tower was. I think the most amazing thing about seeing the tower was how unamazing it was. It's almost the exact same height as what's being proposed. Fane built a tower up there about 3 years ago. It's 500 feet, it's 47 stories, it's about the same square footage, but it's the fourth largest building on that block, to give some perspective of where Toronto is versus where Providence is.
Toronto's high with a lot of cranes in the sky.
Yeah, and we're torturing the one developer who wants to come here and build a building. So you saw no change from June till now. A majority of people still oppose it. We'll see how that flushes out over the next few months.
Okay, another hot button issue right now, not just in Rhode Island, but nationally. Attorney generals in several states have begun investigating sexual abuse by Roman Catholic clergy, opening investigations and issuing subpoenas for documents. The question posed in John Del Volpe's poll to respondents: do you favor or oppose the Rhode Island Attorney General opening investigation into the Archdiocese of Providence on issues related to possible sexual abuse of children? Net support, 89%. Net oppose, 7%.
Yeah, I mean, this was probably the most overwhelming support for any issue questioned in this survey. 89% of Rhode Islanders believe the Attorney General should open an investigation. In the crosstabs, nearly 50% of those participating in the survey identify themselves as Roman Catholic. Overwhelming. You saw some big developments this morning. Bishop Tobin's sort of mentor, he was the auxiliary bishop before coming to Rhode Island, down in Pittsburgh, and his mentor, Cardinal Wuerl, just resigned this morning to the Pope, offered his resignation. It was accepted for his role in the massive abuse in Pennsylvania. A grand jury there found over 1,000 cases of sexual abuse and roughly 300 priests involved with it. 99 of those priests were tied to the Diocese of Pittsburgh. So this is an overwhelming call, I think, by the people of Rhode Island to look into this issue and start it. I believe we're up to 13 states now have attorney generals digging into this issue. So we'll see what probably won't hit this attorney general. It's only got a month or two in office, but whether or not this will move Peter Nerona to take on this issue, the likely candidate to win the Attorney General's position in 3.5 weeks.
Now, the last time we'd spoken with Peter Nerona, he mentioned a number of hurdles the state would have to overcome in order to even begin to conduct an investigation with the grand jury and actually get reports back. But clearly this points to the will of the people looking for it. So the question is, can they exert enough pressure and say, these things can certainly be changed, the ones pointed out by Peter, to enable us to move forward. But again, 89% with, as you said, over 43% of survey respondents identifying themselves as Catholic. That's a big number.
Yeah, and this has some play in the speaker's race down in Cranston, District 15 House race, in which the speaker's been widely criticized by a number of Democratic state legislators for not moving forward with extending the term in which the courts can go back and look and extend backwards. He's been under fire for that. A number of legislators had a press conference a few months ago. That's probably an issue that Steve Frias, the Republican, is going to take advantage of. 89% calling for an investigation into the Diocese of Rhode Island.
So let's tack from that to some more local issues here. Let's talk education. A couple of questions posed in John Del Volpe's poll. Earlier this year, legislation was filed at the Assembly that would require all Rhode Island public schools to have a school resource officer on the premises if a school has over 1,200 students. 2 school resource officers would need to be present. The net support for the school resource officer, 68%, net opposed, 25%.
Yeah, I mean, this is an issue. We've seen shootings across the country. We've been lucky enough in Rhode Island. We recently had a student killed outside of a Providence public school. Be the first case of, not a shooting within the building, but this was outside. This is an Alan Fung issue. This looks like an issue in which the GOP candidate, Cranston Mayor Fung, could be able to exert some pressure on Governor Raimondo, who has been opposed to this and expending the money for this. So that's a possibility of an issue that we could hear more about during the rest of the gubernatorial campaign and also back when the legislature comes back in.
Another big education issue, free college tuition through Rhode Island Promise. The question as posed, do you support or oppose expanding Rhode Island's free college tuition program at CCRI to the state's two four-year colleges so that the last 2 years of tuition at Rhode Island College and URI would be free for those recent high school graduates who are in solid academic standing on track to graduate in 4 years. It's estimated the program would cost $35 million. Net support 55%, net opposition 40%.
Yeah, I think this is good news for Governor Gina Raimondo. Her program, which was just implemented about a little over a year ago in the junior college at CCRI structure. Now, questions have come out how effective that program's been. It looks like a very low number of those who entered a year ago met the minimum standards, a 2.5 grade point average, and achieved the 30 credits. It looks like a very small number are on track in their second year and thus won't be eligible for the free college education. But overall, Rhode Islanders are in favor of this by a margin of 55 to 40. And interesting, only 5% don't have an opinion. Small don't know.
That is a small don't know.
Yeah, on a public policy
We saw
issue.
a lot of undecideds yesterday with
Yeah.
some of the questions. And it was interesting because one of the facets of yesterday's questions, including attributes for a governor, and two of the categories that Governor Raimondo was overwhelmingly ahead on were education and healthcare. But conversely, when asked the question, what is the most number one pressing issue facing the governor of Rhode Island, it was jobs and economy and taxes. So again, this pits an interesting battle again between Cranston Mayor Alan Fung, who did better on some fiscal issues, and the governor who's polling way higher on those education and healthcare issues.
Absolutely.
That fall in the middle of that spectrum, however, for what Rhode Islanders really are looking for from their governor. Continuing along with education, the question was posed about an education bill of rights for students and parents. Let me go through the list of what the Education Bill of Rights would entail. The right to be taught by effective teachers, the right not to be taught by teachers who, after due process evaluation, fail to meet standards established by state and local education officials, the right to appropriate academic materials and resources, the right to safe, clean, and environmental friendly schools, the right to emotionally supportive schools that don't tolerate harassment, discrimination, or abuse, the right to attend a school where funding is based on student need with the goal of providing access to adequate educational opportunities, the right to a pathway out of a failing school, the right to a fair, accurate, and transparent assessment system that measures student performance and need, and finally, the right of parents to current and reliable information about their child's progress and performance. This is an issue that's been discussed before. And let's just say the net support was at 84% for this, net opposition 9%.
Yeah, very interesting issue. It did not include a right to get a bus ride to school, which is obviously plaguing the city of Providence. This is an issue, many states have a Bill of Rights guaranteeing quality education for students and parents. Rhode Island has refused to do this. It's been brought up before. Gary Sass up at the Hassenfeld Institute, the money man, who joins me on Business Mondays, talks about this issue, has been a strong champion of it. And I got to say, this is one I'm completely surprised at. I thought this is a big mandate, it's a big guarantee. And, usually non-parents don't necessarily want to create a new mandated system for educational initiatives. And overwhelmingly, every demographic group, every geography, every age group strongly and overwhelmingly supported this. Now, when we've asked the gubernatorial candidates about it, Joe Trillo's refused to answer, the governor's refused to take a stand on this, and Alan Fung's probably been the most active on it, saying, yeah, I like the tenets of it, I'm not sure I'm ready to guarantee that it's a constitutional amendment in Rhode Island. This is a big issue, and I'll tell you, Rhode Island's education system, the quality of it is under fire and under siege. It's underperforming. This may give a lot of advocates the firepower to move forward and really push for some change and reform and proper funding.
Speaking of funding, the next question is pertaining to a series of articles done by GoLocal Prov pertaining to donations by the Sackler family related to Purdue Pharma and OxyContin. The question is, recently Governor Gina Raimondo has been criticized for accepting $12,500 in campaign and PAC contributions from members of the Sackler family, the owners of Purdue Pharma. The Financial Times has also reported that the family owns Rhode's Pharma, Rhode Island-based drug maker that's among the largest producers of off-patent generic opioids in the U.S. If Governor Gina Raimondo asked you for advice on this, would you suggest she return the money or keep the money? Return the money, 71%.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you hosted some leading national activists, artists who came in 10 days ago or so, 2 weeks ago, I think, who really put the pressure on the governor. And they said, listen, by accepting the money from the Sacklers and Purdue Pharma, de facto Purdue Pharma, that the state of Rhode Island is suing for damages and causing deaths in the state of Rhode Island. You're giving them credibility. You're de facto endorsing what they've done. And the Purdue Pharma Corporation, as well as some of the other manufacturers of opioids, are under massive attack by states and cities and towns for their marketing strategies, which have been clearly identified. I mean, half of them are YouTube videos that show this is amazing organized push to push doctors to write more scripts, and doctors, of course, doing so and fueling this fire. People really want to see some action. I think, for the most part, we've seen in this poll, majority of people like Gina Raimondo. This is one they don't like about Gina Raimondo. 71% are asking her to return the money if so asked.
Let's go into a couple more questions before we turn to the Senate race. Another issue of state and national importance at the moment, sexual harassment. And the question was, in terms of the number of women who face sexual harassment in the workplace, would you say that sexual harassment in Rhode Island is a major problem, minor problem, not a problem, or don't know? Major problem, 35%. Minor problem, 36%. Not a problem, 7%. Don't know, 22%.
Yeah, I was surprised. I don't know if you were, that more Rhode Islanders didn't think this was a major problem, especially coming off the Kavanaugh hearings down at the United States Senate and his confirmation. It's been obviously a leading discussion point in America over the past year because of the Me Too movement. It's shaken up corporate offices, Hollywood, now the United States Senate. Accordingly, it doesn't seem to have shaken up the White House too much, despite the number of allegations. And only that 35% saw this was as a major issue, 34% minor. I was a little surprised. Your thoughts?
It's hard to tell. I mean, I thought the fact that, over a third thought that it was a major issue, I thought maybe that seemed to show that there is a significant issue that needs to be addressed here. The don't know kind of surprises me. It's not really an issue that people really don't have an opinion on. So I guess that was really the surprising one that came out of that question. And finally, the hot button issue, the bus strike, of which there were fires in the first student bus yard last night, impacting 9 buses. Which party do you believe is most responsible for the Providence school bus strike? The Teamsters, the bus company, Mayor Jorge Alorza, or don't know. Teamsters, 31%, bus company, 21%, Alorza, 19%, and don't know, 29%. So,
yeah, I mean, clearly the majority, the largest group, not the majority, but the largest group was putting the blame on the Teamsters for the action. They're striking against the bus company. The bus company is a vendor of the city of Providence. People, I think, have gotten more and more fed up just in the past few days. This poll took place, finished up, I think, on Monday. So there's been a lot of action since Monday in the strike. Legal action by the ACLU, breakdown in negotiations, decision by the city to move forward with new vendor contracts, and then, of course, last night's fire causing upwards of $750,000 within the yard. So obviously this issue is going to continue to grow, and no solution seems to be on track as of yet on Friday at noontime.
So that just about wraps up the questions on these issue areas. You can read them. We'll have them up soon on GoLocalProv.com, so you can catch all of the poll results after the fact. One key race we did not talk about yesterday that we're going to broach today, and this is the Senate race. Incumbent Sheldon Whitehouse and Bob Flanders.
Yeah, Bob Flanders has not been able to move the needle. In June, we polled him. He was down 54-32, and now he's down 56-32. 2% of undecided moved to Sheldon Whitehouse. I'm not terribly surprised. I think the tenor of Washington and the anti-Trumpism in Rhode Island points to the fact that they want a Democratic legislature down there. And I also think, Flanders has run a very, very traditional campaign. He's bought some TV and he's done some speeches, but he hasn't done anything to shake things up and tell Rhode Islanders why they have to send him to Washington, D.C., and they should remove Sheldon Whitehouse. And certainly Sheldon Whitehouse has some detractors and is controversial on some issues. But this did take place after Senator Whitehouse's performance in the Kavanaugh hearings, which was criticized both locally and nationally. So, you know, he's got 3.5 weeks to make some hay, but I think he's got to change the strategy because the strategy hasn't moved the needle in 4 months.
It's interesting. It's almost shades of 2006 when Senator Whitehouse had run against Link Chafee. Now, again, facing a moderate, Bob Flanders all along has said, look, I'd really be a bipartisan Republican down there. He's not a water-carrying Trump supporter by any stretch of the imagination. He's given plenty of donations to Democrats. But all Sheldon Whitehouse has to say is you've got the R next to your name, and that's enough to energize those who are against the current administration. So, again, it's history repeating itself.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, just to wrap up, I think the big learnings were very strong support for education across the board, whether it was college funding or this Bill of Rights for parents or students. And obviously, probably the biggest news is the call for an investigation into the Diocese of Providence. You know, John Della Volpe's, you know, no one's fool. He does some of the best polling in the country, regular on Morning Joe and The Daily Show. He does work for, you know, the United States Marine Corps, and he was just in Canada for the State Department. Does polling on all sorts of issues, both for governmental entities and for-profit and non-profit major companies globally. So, you know, we have a lot of confidence in it. I think what we've seen in the past is his polling's been the strongest in the marketplace. And I also think his strategy of using a digital strategy gets at those types of voters that you simply cannot get on a telephone survey, and they are distinct. One is young minority men and women, which you're not going to get on a hard line or on a cell phone strategy, and need to be included. And second of all, older white, generally conservative men who don't want to participate in a phone survey. So and can be tracked to the under reporting of them in the 2016 presidential election. The phone surveys just couldn't get at them and missed globally how Trump voters would turn out in key states around the country.
It's almost that sort of, you know, they don't trust who's on the other side of the phone, don't want to participate in what they perceive as perhaps could be some sort of biased process, but online the questions are there, they're not being pressured by questions, and can be perhaps more open. And as you said, John spoke to that, being able to capture that that reaction as well. So we'll have all of the information from John Della Volpe's statewide poll. Anything else you want to add before we
No, I mean, I think this is going to spark some discussions. You know, John did the polling in October of 17 on the Paw Sox and broke that, really unveiled that Rhode Islanders just weren't interested in a massive public subsidy for the billionaire owners. Now, that had a series of triggers, including the team leaving, going to Worcester. I think this lays out some pathways to on a number of different issues. One, if Fane wants to get some public support, Fane's got to start talking about his tower. Number two, a little worrisome for Governor Raimondo on some issues. This resource officer is an opportunity for fun, and also the Sackler opioid money, the state suing Purdue Pharma. The Sacklers are billionaire family that own the company. That's a little bit of a red zone issue. So look for more. There'll be a series of analysis pieces this weekend on the polling and reaction to it. Look forward to seeing everybody.
Okay, and I believe we are going to be right back here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center with who we usually welcome on Fridays, former state representative, former deputy secretary of state, now heads up Stages of Freedom, Ray Rickman, to give his big view.